Neil is going to talk to us about something very close to my heart. He's going to talk about Hugh Hamilton, who was a Northern Irishman like me. You'll see what the connection is when Neil gets going. Over to you, Neil.
Well, listen, it's lovely to see everyone here today. As some of you might know, I'm a teacher, so and I've brought my my board rubber with me. So if anyone fancies taking a nap, it's coming your way. Hopefully, it won't be too long. It's about 20 minutes I plan to talk for. So yeah, it's been a lovely journey for me, learning about this amazing character. Along the way, I've met some fabulous members, some really lovely people, and I particularly wanted to thank the Triple M Register, who've been really kind and willing to share. And I also want to take the opportunity to say thank you to some of the staff at Brooklands. It's clear there are a lot of people who are keen to keep this man's legacy alive. So here we go. Hugh Caulfield Hamilton was born in Omagh, as John suggested, on the 18th of June in 1905. He's born to a wealthy family who owned a large house at the edge of the town. His mother Agnes was from England and his father Claude, who was Irish. Claude was a successful solicitor who worked with a local authority. From an early age he showed a passion for cars. A neighbour close to his home bought a car, and shortly after, Hugh, as a very young boy, offered to clean it. When he was caught driving the car away, he was 13, his excuse was that he was going to do it at his own home. I guess this was an early insight into his character, someone who was always willing to grab an opportunity by the steering wheel and put his foot down. Throughout his childhood and teenage years, Hamilton and his younger brother would spend their time watching and progressing, first in bike racing, then onto motorbikes and latterly cars. Sadly, in 1922, Hamilton's father died and the family moved back to England. The following year, his mum remarries and becomes Mrs. Chaston. I've recently discovered that they lived just down the road in Bookham, and there's some evidence to suggest that Hugh lived there and would regularly commute into London down the A3. So 8 years later, Hamilton started working for University Motors in London as a car salesman, hence the connection. At this time, the company was based in a very prestigious showroom called Stratton House, Piccadilly, Mayfair. Some of you, I'm sure, have seen pictures. John Thornley, who became the MG director, general manager, recounts a story from 1930 of Hamilton in his early days at He was working, two other little connections I've made, a chap called Stanley Kemble, who was our South East Centre's chairman, and John Everett, who was another employee, but another racing driver. That's someone I'm going to look at in the future. So before joining MG, Thornley was working in the City of London and would regularly pop into to see Hamilton. Hamilton was working on an M-Type at the time, and was constantly tuning it. The story goes, and these are Thornley's actual words, on one particular pouring wet, dark, filthy night, Hamilton said, "Come for a ride, John, in the M-Type. I think I've got it right this time." I was very pleased. "Hi, come and grab a seat." I was very pleased to go for a ride with Hamilton in his car. There's a street next to the showroom, Duke Street. It has taxis parked down the middle and one lane of traffic. Hamilton turns between the cabs and the curb and puts his foot down. I'm absolutely petrified that someone would step out from between the cars. They wouldn't stand a chance. Hamilton turned into University Motors and proudly announced that he had done 50 coming down the hill. That's the sort of dash and verve he showed. Shortly afterwards, John Thornley bought his first MG. Interestingly, I've also discovered that Lord Howe, who was a famous and established racing driver at the time, was a University Motors company director. So I think it's no surprise that their relationship and racing career started at this time. Hugh's first proper race took place at Brooklands in 1930. It was a shared drive in O'Reilly. His co-driver was Rick Croft. despite having a puncture at a critical time, they went on to win the 1100 class. This was Hugh's first taste of victory. So 1931, the early C-type racing. So the following year, University Motors bought, realising Hamilton's potential, they bought him an MGC. This is the actual car. It's quite incredible, really. Belongs to a lovely couple who live in Australia, and they have several MGs actually. I'll show you a picture of another one in a minute. But they're very proud to own it. Now I have got some footage that I came across just last week. So I want you to look out for car 66. I don't know whether the owners actually have seen this bit of footage. It's silent film, but yeah, look out for Hugh Hamilton driving car 66. Quite incredible, really.
Typical Brooklands weather.
Yes, absolutely pouring rain, isn't it there?
Track's still appalling in even those days. Look at it.
I think there were 13 MGC types racing on that day. There he is. It's quite incredible footage at the time, you know, bearing in mind the age. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's quite incredible footage. Way ahead of its time. No, yeah, way ahead of its time, isn't it? So later that year, University Motors entered Hamilton into the Ulster TT, the Ards event. This took place over the famous circuit close to where Hamilton grew up. The C-Type is now fitted with a supercharger. Despite another fabulous performance, Hamilton's race came to the end following mechanical issues. However, this performance didn't go unnoticed, and this is where he gained his nickname, the Wild Man of Ards. So this is the sister car, if you like, of the car 66. Also belongs to this lovely Australian couple. They shipped it over, actually. This was at last summer at Silverstone MG Live. Incredible lengths people go to share their passion, isn't it, really? What's interesting to note, and I don't think it's formally recognised, but you know, I'd be interested to hear from anyone if they've come across it. I don't think it's a coincidence. The two colours are clearly Oxford and Cambridge blue. As I said, I don't think that's been formally recognised, but of course, University Motors background, you'll see there are other cars that have similar colour. So, moving on to 1932. The 32 season started slowly as UM had sold Hamilton's C-Type to one of their customers. This left him without a car. That is until one of Hamilton's emerging supporters, Captain Noakes, entered him into a Brooklands Junior 1000 Club race using a brand new J-Type. This was the race that, despite having to retire with melted big ends, others began to notice Hamilton's talent. This picture of, again, notice the two colours there. Shortly after that, he was given his Continental debut by Lord Howe, his boss at University Motors, in the French Grand Prix, and on this occasion he was driving Howe's Bugatti. He achieved a very respectful 9th place for his first GP. His next race came several weeks later at the Nürburgring in Germany. Captain Noakes had his J-Type shipped over for Hamilton, and after some technical issues, Hamilton went on to break the lap record for a car of the size on his first attempt. The German crowds went wild. There are two well-told anecdotes of this period. The first takes place in a German restaurant at the end of the first day of practice. Two senior team officials are having their dinner, when all of a sudden Hamilton bursts into the room with a parcel under his arm. His sheepish grin and a formal bow to the maitre d', he unwrapped the parcel and rolled his disemboweled supercharger onto the table. "What the devil do I do with this?" he shouted. A mixture of fuel and oil ran from the open ports onto the pristine white tablecloths, to the horror of everyone around them. Hamilton had very little sleep that night. but the following morning started the race with an intact supercharger. He'd been working on it all night. He went on to win his class in that German Grand Prix, and in fact that was MG's first European success. The second anecdote was shortly after returning from Germany, two customers, brothers, turned up at in central London, interested to purchase a Monterey C-type midget. As part of his sales patter, Hamilton offered to take them for a test drive. Both agreed, and off the first customer went. On return 5 minutes later, witnesses say that he looked physically shaken, and after struggling to lift himself out of the car, he turned to his brother and said, "For God's sake, let's buy this damn thing before he kills us all." An interesting sales pitch. So moving on to 1933. It was the year that MG launched two new models, the K3 and the J4. K4 was a sports racing version of the J2, as many of you know, and the K3 of the a racing version of the K1. Soon after its launch, Lord Howe, University Motors director, realised the potential of these and approached Cecil Kimber, suggested he put a team into the Mille Miglia. Howe selected Hamilton as his co-driver, again a demonstration of Hamilton's skill. And shortly before this, Hamilton had just been awarded the coveted 120 mile an hour prize at Brooklands. Quite an achievement for someone of his age. Initially, Hamilton missed the early race preparations as University Motors wouldn't give him time off work. However, 3 team cars were complete and the first went out to practice on the course. The MG factory team cars were driven by Lord Howe and Hamilton, Tim Birkin, Reuben and Count Lorani and George Easton. The MGs collected the team prize with average speeds of around 60 miles an hour. They might have been faster, but they had to frequently stop for spark plug changes. This was the first time that a non-Italian team had won this incredible, prestigious event. And shortly after, Hamilton was off to Germany again, this time racing the supercharged J4. This proved very successful for Hamilton and MG. He achieved class wins and won a number of hill climbs, and he was becoming quite a celebrity in Germany at the time. So that's a J4 there. It was sold at Goodwood just before lockdown for, well, you'll see I don't know if you can see the figure in the corner, but it's just under about $250,000, I think, sold for in the end. After a short spell back at University Motors, Hamilton set out for his third attempt at the Ards circuit. Significantly, those around him thought he was now driving to his best ability, and this was to be perhaps his best race. It's held on open public roads, and Nirvali, who was perhaps still considered one of the greatest racing drivers of all time, made an appearance, a last-minute entry. He was driving an Abingdon-prepared MG K3. You can see at this time MG were keen to promote their brand and starting to invite top drivers from all over the world. He'd not even sat in the car when he arrived, and he said he could never get understand the pre-selector gearbox. However, Nirali astonished the crowds with his speed, but he didn't dominate the race. 3 hours in, Hamilton had a tremendous lead in his J4, and Nirali was third. In fact, this is him in the lead. You can't see Nirali at this stage. He's way behind. But everything went disastrously wrong for the local man when he came into the pits for fuel and tyres towards the end of the race. That particular moment was captured by Frederick Gordon Crosby, who was Autocar's illustrator at the time. Pulling into the pits, the mechanic seemed tired, and Hamilton, determined to keep his lead, shouted at him, which made the man worse. The filler was left undone, fuel splashed everywhere, the front axle jack failed, and another had to be found. Finally, the starter refused. The mechanic, using a spanner as a switch, set his glove and overalls alight. He was soon put out, but there was difficulty getting the bonnet strap on too. It took them a total of 7 minutes, and lost Hamilton the race. In the end, just 40 seconds prevented him from being the man, or the Irishman I should say, who beat Nibali. Excuse me. The same was felt by Kimberat MG. When the company looked to expand their business in Czechoslovakia, they turned to and Hamilton to be their ambassador. As the first British driver to race the GP there, he proved a massive draw for the crowds. On the day, the weather was terrible and the organisers were in two minds as to whether to go ahead or not. But the race did, and soon the rain worsened and driving conditions became very treacherous. However, this enabled the J-Type to overtake the much bigger cars, and after 10th lap, Hamilton overtook one of the Mercedes. The crowds went wild. Unfortunately, on the next lap, things went horribly wrong for him again. Onlookers reported that his waterproof poncho lifted up in the wind and covered his face. Travelling at over 70 miles an hour and unable to steer, he shot off the road and into a concrete post. The car came off the road, rolled several times, and it cracked the engine case in doing so. Hamilton wasn't thrown clear, and when the car came to stop, he was still inside. His injuries were severe. He'd broken several ribs and internal injuries, but thankfully after several days he was off the danger list and on the long road to recovery. During that time he went out to his brother's tea plantation in India, so again it would give you some idea of the wealth of the family. The following year, 1934, and not deterred by the accident, he was determined to recover and accept the offer of becoming a professional racing driver. A young American millionaire, Whitney Straight, had spotted Hamilton's talent. They had raced each other again several times at Brooklands, and Straight was determined to sign Hamilton to his team. It was at this point that Hamilton resigned his job at and turned a professional racing driver. After the formation of the team, Whitney Straight also persuaded his friend Richard Seaman to join. He'd recently sold Seaman his K3 Magnet, and although he was inexperienced as a driver, Straight had also recognised his talents too. So I just wanted to bring this up. My daughter, when I showed it last night, said you should put an arrow on it, so I haven't had time to do that. But actually, by this time, University Motors were using Hamilton's draw to sell the cars. And in fact, if you look in the third paragraph, I'll read it for everyone. It says, at our showrooms are able to be seen all models, while demonstration cars are available at all times. Hamilton, who was often piloted MG cars to victory, is a member of our staff and will only be too happy to give you the benefit of his experience to those interested. So going back to Seaman, this is Seaman's MG. It belongs to a lovely couple, Elizabeth and Andrew. They live over sort of Windsor way, and I was very lucky. They invited me over there last year, and it was a part of an event, but they took time to talk to me about the car as well. This is Seaman's actual K3. I've not been able to find any pictures of Hamilton's K3, although I guess it must be out there somewhere. So Richard Seaman was to play a very significant role in Hamilton's future. Over the course of 1934, both had become great friends and raced their MGs together at a number of events across Europe. So after several races, mechanical problems had forced Hamilton to retire. He was given the driving opportunity of a lifetime, and this is when this is one of Whitney Straight's Maseratis that he'd had specially made from the factory in Italy. You can see his racing logo down the side there. It would have been a cutting-edge car of its time compared to one of our F1 cars today. He'd asked if he would drive the new car up to the up-and-coming Swiss Grand Prix in 1934. The season had seen the introduction of the mighty German teams of Mercedes and Auto Union, so the bar was being set very high. Hamilton's friend and teammate Seaman was also entered in another Maserati. The race went well and Hamilton was in a good position going into the last lap. However, tragically, on entering the sweeping corner, the car shot off the road and hit a tree. Hamilton was killed instantly. The following post-mortem indicated that he had suffered a heart attack during the race and would have died before the impact, probably injuries caused from his previous accident the year before. However, it was a tragic end to a young life. He was just 29. Following his death, Seaman loaded Hamilton's silver K3 onto the back of the trailer and drove the car back to the UK. It must have been a sight, as the vehicle used to tow the trailer was Hamilton's very own Bentley. Seaman also arranged for his burial in Bern. Little did he know that he would also be killed 2 years later himself. So what was his legacy? Well, I think it's summarised really by one final story which I read about Michael Bradstock. He was the managing director. No, what was he? Was he managing director? Chairman of University Motors. And he recounts the story of being driven down the A3 by Hamilton when he was age 13. He went on to become the chairman of the company when his father stepped aside. It must have been an incredible experience, perhaps even life-changing for him. After arriving back at University Motors showroom, he turned to his dad and said, "That's what an MG is designed to do." Listen, thank you so much for letting me share this incredible story with you today.
So
thank you very much.
Friends,
Write a book on it.
thank you, Neil.